You're all very, very welcome to the Simon Brooke Lecture of 2023. My name is Claire Ostick and I am the Housing Policy Manager at Clúid Housing. And some of you who don't know, so Clúid Housing is one of the leading approved housing bodies in Ireland, which means we provide housing, lifelong housing for people and their families, and we're a not-for-profit organisation. So just before we get into the official welcome from our CEO, just a couple of kind of like technical side of things, so just so you know exactly what to expect from the evening. So we have a presentation and a welcome from Conal, who's Simon's son. We also have international speakers over from Scotland, from Spain, from Finland to share their experience and their learnings on youth housing with us. We also have video contributions from Canada, from New Zealand and Australia. And then we also have the panel discussion where each of you will be able to contribute to the discussion, ask burning questions that you have, and any other kind of outstanding questions that you might have as well. And then we also have a contribution from Karina, who is one of our young people who's going to be talking about her experience and sharing her story with us. So we're very delighted to have you as well. And then wrapping it up, reflections from Clúid from our Chief Commercial Officer, Eileen O'Connor. So I'm absolutely delighted to now welcome Brian O'Gorman, who is our CEO. Just a bit about Brian as well. So Brian was the Clúid #1 employee. He's a great champion of policy. He's done so much over the last 29 years and he has been a big supporter of the work on youth housing as well. So I'd like to welcome Brian O'Gorman to the floor.
I didn't write that last bit, by the way, okay? I'd like to welcome you all to Simon Brooke Lecture for 2023. And it really is inspiring to see so many people coming together for this event in memory of Simon, my friend and colleague. We are very pleased to host this event in the Lighthouse Cinema, a venue I understand that he was very fond of. Simon was a passionate supporter of the exchange of international learning and best practice in housing policy. It was on this basis that the inaugural Simon Brooke Lecture was established 3 years ago, acting as a springboard for policy discussions. The topics that are chosen portray the importance of housing to a wider range of societal issues. Clúid is committed to investigating opportunities to promote housing solutions for young people. In many ways, Clúid is already a provider of youth housing. Around 9% of our total resident population are aged between 18 and 24. However, what we are trying to do is designed specifically for young adults with the appropriate configuration and services. It's clear to most of us in the sector that such an offering is needed. The past 5 years have seen a 57% increase in the number of young adults experiencing homelessness in Ireland. The reality is that young people are overrepresented in emergency accommodation, and more worryingly, the scale of the issue is likely to be underrepresented in official figures, as young adults are more likely to be experiencing hidden homelessness, where young adults avail themselves of temporary and insecure accommodation in couch surfing, living in hostels or doubling up with extended family and friends. In addition, young people are also less likely to be in full-time employment, more likely to be working in precarious industries for lower wages, and are consequently less able to secure private rental accommodation. These issues, coupled with the lack of available units in the private rental sector, mean young people are often forced to enter insecure arrangements well into adulthood. There is much evidence to support the contention that early intervention and preventative measures are critical. Such measures put in place early are more likely to be successful and the outcomes much more durable. Youth housing is an investment to prevent more expensive interventions with less benign outcomes in the future. Early intervention brings the possibility of changing the trajectory of a young person's life, bringing them an opportunity to reach their full potential, contribute to society in a meaningful way, and shape the life that they want to live rather than make do with the circumstances they find themselves in. Thankfully, there is a welcome sense of momentum in terms of seeking solutions to the housing difficulties faced by young people. Much of this optimism and enthusiasm is underpinned by the Department of Housing's youth housing strategy, the first of its kind in 20 years. Young adults are too often neglected. If age-friendly housing is the acceptable face of social and affordable housing, youth housing is the seldom discussed and barely tolerated face. Excuse me. Clúid has a responsibility to consider how we can assist vulnerable young people with their need for safe, secure, affordable housing. We are a resident-focused, non-profit landlord who seeks to provide quality services. A secure, quality home is all that most young adults want or need. However, where additional supports are necessary, we seek to partner with specialist organisations. We believe that it is advantageous to keep these services separate. Besides, there are many organisations who provide these services in a far better way than we could hope to. Our view is that separating the landlord service from the support service is a model that is more likely to be successful. However, I am conscious that there are other models that have provided both successfully, and I'm looking forward to hearing about their experience. At this evening's event, as Claire has said, you will hear from youth housing practitioners from several countries. We're delighted to welcome representatives from Rock Trust and Almond Housing Association from Scotland, NEL from Finland, and, excuse my pronunciation now, Provivienda and Hogasi from Spain. We will also be sharing input from organisations in Canada, Australia and New Zealand via video. Closer to home, we will be hearing from representatives from the Coalition to End Youth Homelessness and TUSLA, who will be joining us on the panel. Finally, Karina Tropman will be sharing her story of growing up in the care system. Learning from our international colleagues who run established youth housing services offers us a unique opportunity to determine what is right for young people in Ireland. I want to acknowledge my colleagues Andrew Daly and Claire Ostick, who alongside their communication colleagues deserve all the credit for this event. Claire and Andrew have adopted Simon's mantle of enlightened policy debate as a step towards tangible progress. I want to leave you with a quotation from Sinead Casey, a youth worker and psychotherapist with the Dublin Simon community. During a consultation event held by our policy team in April, Sinead spoke powerfully about how organisations should frame the services that we offer to young people. We talk a lot about vulnerability, Sinead says, but we need to focus on empowerment and opportunity instead. To that, I would add the hope that young people will continue to challenge us, elbowing us aside and out of our complacency when we move too slowly. We hope that tonight's presentations will be illuminating, inspiring, but most of all, enjoyable. Thank you for coming along this evening to discuss and explore with us best practice in the provision of youth housing. I'm finishing now, and it gives me great pleasure to introduce Conall Hussaf, Simon's son. Conall, like Simon, is working in policy, although in his case in the area of energy and climate policy. Please give Conall a warm welcome.
So thank you, Brian, for the introduction, and many thanks to Clúid for asking me to speak this evening. So as was mentioned, my name is Conall, and I am Simon's son, a fact that I am told is becoming increasingly obvious as the years roll on. So to kick off, I want to kind of give a personal feeling of Simon's approach to his work, how he discussed it at home, how it influenced me, and why I think he kind of worked on this housing policy stuff at all. Many of you will know Simon as a housing policy man who happened to have a son. I hope to complement that picture with a dad who happened to work in housing policy. So I should note that, as Brian said, I also work in policy of the energy and climate variety. I live in Brussels and work in a think tank over there, and we deal with a lot of European energy and climate issues. So while I didn't quite join the family firm, I did sort of follow in the footsteps to an extent, and my career choices were hugely influenced by Simon's work. Now, as a teenager, I have to admit that I found it hard to answer the question, what does your dad do for work? The answer, well, he's a self-employed housing policy consultant, wasn't exactly a straightforward one to explain. At one point it was put to me by a friend, given that I had no clue, evidently, what my dad actually did, that I should seriously consider whether he was in fact a secret agent. Despite the fact that I found it hard to grasp these sort of nuances of day-to-day social housing policy work, I always had the sense that Simon felt what he did was worthwhile. I felt that he put his energy into his work for good reasons, first at Focus Ireland and then as editor of Cornerstone, the housing magazine, as a consultant, lecturing at Trinity, which he really loved to do, and of course with Clúid. He always struck me as really interested and motivated and committed to his work. Now, it wasn't that he would come home from the office every day and sit me down and explain all of his daily virtuous deeds. Far from it. Simon was far too modest for that sort of thing, exceedingly modest at times. I don't think he would have ever believed that there would be such a thing as a Simon Brooke Lecture. But no, he didn't hammer me over the head with his work. Instead, if I ever asked him about it, he would sort of calmly explain and discuss the topic. And from his tone and his attitude, I knew that he sort of believed in the process. I think that he wanted to make a positive difference and that he had strong reasons for thinking that he could do so in social housing policy. Now, despite me standing here praising him, I know for a fact that Simon would not have wanted me to paint him in a pure saintly light. So I'll take the opportunity to have a very brief and gentle dig while I'm here. An often recalled observation that I made probably as a boy at the dinner table went as follows. Anna and Simon, Anna, my mother, would be discussing the latest in current affairs, the latest bit of political news, and if it was deemed to be bad news, the response from Simon would be, well, it's just typical, you know. And if the news was occasionally good, the judgment would be, and it's about bloody time too. So you see, he was capable of cynicism when the occasion called for it, and of course would often come home from work drained or stressed like everybody does. But even through those very common struggles, Simon was, I think, buoyed by the belief that he had in his work. And as I grew older and I went to university, I benefited hugely from Simon's ability to listen and to help people arrive at solutions. I would explain to him some issue I was having with an essay or what job to apply for, and I always left the conversation with a renewed sense of clarity. And as we began to discuss sort of more serious issues of economics and news and occasionally even housing policy, I think, I could experience for myself what I think Simon had been offering to the world of social housing policy. And throughout those discussions, my impression really deepened that Simon believed in his work and that most importantly, I think he enjoyed it. He understood all too well that his work wasn't guaranteed to change the world, but he saw it as fulfilling and as a worthwhile means of contributing with his own blend of personality and acuity. And as I've now started to engage with policy challenges in my own slightly different field, I also enjoy the challenges, and I also believe that it matters. And this perspective is very much influenced and inspired by Simon's achievements and how he sort of modestly but assuredly went about delivering them. Of course, what I and anybody else here who knew Simon would like most of all is to continue to share the legacy of his work with him and benefit from his sharp mind and his patient ear. But more than anyone, Simon himself wanted to continue to contribute. And I know that he had bold plans to make the most of his so-called retirement. Sadly, this is not the life he was offered, but Anna and I take great solace from Clúid's continuing great work, and especially from this event. So tonight's topic is undoubtedly a really essential one, and one that has, of course, affected me and many people that I know in Ireland. But Simon would have been delighted that this event is mostly not about him, but about important and valuable ideas and actions. So, as I'm not the expert here, at this point I'll bring an end to the personal touch and pass on to the people in the know. Thank you very much.
That was fantastic. Thank you so much, Conal, for that personal touch. And I suppose, like, the Simon Brooke Lecture is here to act as a springboard for policy discussions and talk about the different topics that are relevant to the AHP sector. So thank you so much for that. So next we have Making the Shift, Youth Homelessness and Innovation Lab and the Queensland Youth Housing Coalition. So this is the first video screening that we are showing with you tonight, and we're actually very lucky with the timing of how it all lined up, particularly with the Australian one. So they had an event, the coalition had an event on youth homelessness and housing in Australia, so they were actually able to film snippets and send it over to share with you all today. So we will now play the first video.
Hi, my name is Melanie Redman.
And I'm Stephen Gates.
And we co-lead the Making the Shift Youth Homelessness Social Innovation Lab in Canada. A little bit about us.
I run the Canadian Observatory on Homelessness. It's a research think tank, and we conduct and mobilize research designed to have an impact on solutions to homelessness.
And I lead Away Home Canada, which is a national coalition working to prevent and end youth homelessness. We also lead a pan-Canadian network of service providers called the National Learning Community on Youth Homelessness. We're going to talk a little bit about the work we're doing in Canada through the Making the Shift Youth Homelessness Social Innovation Lab. And it's really important. We started this work together back in 2016 and launched the Innovation Lab in 2017. And what we realized is if we wanted to make a shift to prevention in Canada, we needed more knowledge of how to do that. So we have a comprehensive research program to get those answers that focuses on shifting to prevention and early intervention and sustaining successful exits from homelessness. And it has 3 cross-cutting themes that you can see as well. To date, we've funded 39 original research projects across Canadian universities that focuses on the prevention of youth homelessness, and we're starting to yield results from those projects. We've also been doing demonstration projects on models of prevention and housing first adapted for youth in Canadian communities. These demonstration projects are really important because they're collaborations with service providers to deliver services and to engage in continuous quality improvement as we go to get the best possible outcomes for young people and their families. Again, heavy, rigorous research and evaluation designed not only to understand the outcomes we're getting from these interventions, but also to understand how the interventions are working and to engage in that continuous quality improvement. There are a number of interventions that we've been testing, and Steve is going to talk about those.
Thank you, Melanie. I'm going to begin with enhancing family and natural supports. Next. One of the things that we know from homelessness service delivery in Canada is that when young people leave the family, they disappear and are framed as the problem. We actually think that the family and building those natural supports, meaningful adults in young people's life is essential to helping stabilize their situations, keep them in place, etc. We also have been testing out some school-based early interventions. Both of these are imports from Australia. So the first one, next, is called, or first, why do schools matter? The thing that we always say is that, every young person who is currently homeless was in school once, and it's very possible that somebody knew something was wrong. So what we've been working with from these Australian examples is how do we do community school partnerships where the school isn't required to figure everything out, but the community brings the expertise on working with young people and their families. Next. There's 2 of these approaches. One is called Reconnect, and it's about keeping young people in place. Next. And there are 4 pillars to this, right? So by keeping people in place, what we mean is if someone's from a small town, they shouldn't have to leave where they're from and move to the big city to get help. We need to help them stay in place so that they can move when they are in better circumstances. We stabilize the living situation, so we support and understand what's going wrong that's creating the tension in the household. We support young people and their families. So the client isn't just the isolated young person. It also includes their family. And we enhance their engagement with education. Next. The Upstream project is one that's very inspiring, and there's lots of examples of it emerging in Europe right now, and hopefully in Ireland at some time. So it takes that Reconnect model, but it adds one thing that's very important. Next. It has a standardized needs assessment that every young person in the school takes. And the ideal target for this work is young people between 12 and 16 who generally don't have access to good supports if they're experiencing homelessness or at risk. So they complete a standardized assessment. Everyone does it. The results are tallied and compared with what the school knows about the young people. who showed up as being at risk. In some cases, the school is already aware that there are some challenges, but many young people who are at risk double down on school. And so the school staff may not be aware that there's a problem. So this helps get at those young people who are really the hidden homeless. Next. This is a really important intervention, Housing First for Youth. And given your the focus at this conference on housing options, we need to really deep dive on this. It's something that I know many people in Ireland are aware of, but we want to fill you in on what's going on. Next. The core principles of Housing First are designed to meet the needs of developing adolescents and young adults. So we don't take the adult model, change the age band-aid and call it homelessness junior. We actually create something that's based on what we know about working with young people. Next. The range of supports is broader than what we see in the regular Housing First program because, again, it's dealing with young people. So things like access to income and education are prioritized, social inclusion, helping young people reconnect with family, helping young people identify what they want to do in life and let them set their own pathway. Next. We have clear outcome areas for young people in this program, and it's not just housing stability. We feel that we need to really focus more on health and well-being, social inclusion, education and employment. If we get those things right, the housing will likely take care of itself. Next. We have 3 demonstrations projects in Canada, one for currently homeless youth, one for young people leaving care, and an Indigenous-led one supporting Indigenous youth. The rigorous research on this is important to note because in some quarters, people suggest there isn't any good research defending Housing First for Youth. There are a number of needs assessments that have been done in Europe and are ongoing, good handful of them, and they're showing positive results. But what we're doing with the sites in Toronto and Ottawa is a 48-month randomized controlled trial. So the results are coming in, and we're doing some analysis of the 24-month stage of the project, and the results are really, really compelling in a positive sense. And stay tuned because those research results will be made public within the next 8 months. Next. The final thing we want to point out is that those core principles of Housing First for Youth actually kind of guide your own Housing for All Youth Homelessness strategy. So over time, we'll understand that Housing First for Youth can be done in Ireland, should be done in Ireland. There are some good examples there, and we shouldn't be afraid to call it what it is. So good luck with your event. We wish we were there.
Thanks so much for having us, everyone. Take care.
Our focus is on addressing homelessness and the underlying causes. The vision of the Queensland Youth Housing Coalition is all young people safely housed. QIHC is committed to improving the life opportunities and well-being of young people impacted by homelessness by working collaboratively across government and non-government organisations and the private sector to address homelessness through the provision of housing and addressing the multitude of associated issues that impact well-being, such as poverty, access to education, health services, income, safety, and social inclusion. QIHC acknowledges that connection and relationships are key for all young people and underpin our collective work.
Hi, my name's Nick. I work with CDC Youth and Family Services in South Burnett, which is a regional area in Queensland, about 3 hours northwest of Brisbane. So yes, in our area, the youth homelessness issue has just gotten very, very bad over the past couple of years, obviously with COVID. It's just been an issue that we've been contending with. Even though we've got a little region, it's a very big issue. So, seeing lots of things like tents at the back of our offices, and tents and parks, and then undercover areas, and it's just growing. And I think that's because young people are just at a huge disadvantage with the supports that they get from government services. they're struggling to get employment, and when they're on youth allowance and government allowances, they don't have enough money to afford rent. And that just creates homelessness. So we have a 6-bed youth hostel, so we have young people staying in our crisis accommodation there, as well as some initiatives we've set up ourselves. So we have approached locals in our community to rent privately from them and then sublease to young people to give them an opportunity to build up their rental history, and to give them an avenue out of crisis accommodation. We're also looking at some other projects around sourcing funding through government initiatives to have housing built for young people that they can rent directly from us as opposed to subleasing. And yes, looking at other options too in terms of sustaining tenancies, so some preventative work for young people and families that have young people in them to avoid them becoming homeless as well. So rental subsidies, support with advocacy to rental agencies and the Department of Housing. So that's what I do.
So we're Open Doors Youth Service. So we are Queensland's only LGBTQIAP+ youth-specific service. So we provide a range of services, including housing support, counselling. We have a trans and gender diverse program for just general trans and gender diverse young people, as well as trans femme. We have a drug and alcohol program, as well as providing a whole bunch of psychosocial groups.
We also have a counsellor that's part of our team that's funded through the Be Mind program. Yeah.
Yep.
In terms of the question was what homeless young people need at the moment. I think community is a big one. A lot of our young people are quite isolated. So being able to sort of utilise our service to access social groups, to meet other people that identify similarly to them really helps. Housing, obviously. A big thing we're seeing at the moment is young people under 16 accessing our service really urgently needing housing. Because of the political debates that are going on at the moment around trans young people and gender affirming care, a lot of our young people are unsafe in the houses that they're living at when their parents find out they identify as transgender. So we're seeing a younger and younger demographic needing to leave their house because of domestic violence, and we just don't have the resources to house them outside of kind of trying to look at their internal support network. So more services for people under 16, definitely.
And I think just a better accessibility of these services. So I think what a lot of the barriers that our young people are facing, a lot of services are very gendered and binary in their criteria. So, a lot of our young people are only able to access services based on their sex assigned at birth instead of their true identities. So a lot of young people are being forced into housing that doesn't align with their gender, and which puts them quite at risk of harm. And so because of this, a lot of young people are opting to stay homeless or stay on the streets instead of accessing services. Not only that, but, oh my God, I've just lost my train of thought right there.
Binary housing services. Young people can't access them because of their gender identity.
Yes, and safety. So as Tara mentioned before, so a lot of young people are facing family and domestic violence, and we've come to realise that a lot of these young people often don't have rights when it comes to looking after themselves, where the parents have a lot of control given to them by either child safety or the government. And so these young people, again, are forced to stay in these really unsafe housing options, which then lead them to flee and live on the streets.
Absolutely brilliant. Jan Lang. I am the Cairns Manager of Homeless Accommodation Services for Anglicare. Cairns is a regional town in part of Queensland, or regional city. We have limited youth homelessness services, but we do have 2 crisis accommodation services for immediate beds. There is 5 for young women, up 16 to 25. And there is 5 for young men, 16 to 25. We have a transitional housing program run by a company called YouthLink, which is a not-for-profit, where they house 12 young people in shared accommodation with limited supports throughout the week. That's for low to moderate needs for young people. And that's all we have in our region. currently for young people. Unfortunately, we are trying to expand that, and we are hoping to get a youth foyer announcement shortly, which will house 40 young people who are earning or learning. Thanks.
Hi, my name's Chris. I work for Queensland Youth Services. I'm the coordinator of the Youth Housing and Reintegration Service team in Townsville. So Townsville, we have 2 youth shelters in Townsville. One is Iona House, which is for young women. That has 5 rooms, and the other one is Taj Youth Shelter again. That's a co-ed shelter, has about 5 rooms. We also have a service called Share House. They do more transitional housing. They got quite a few apartments around the city. Again, they work with young people transitioning from that accommodation out to more stable stuff. So again, Townsville, we are in a housing crisis. We're doing everything we can around with wraparound supports to help those young people transition independence. But yeah, it's a real struggle, but we're doing everything. Thank you.
Hi, my name's Vicky and I work for Insync Youth Services. We are based in the Redlands and we have transitional accommodation for young people so they can live in our units for up to 12 months and we support them while they're there to develop their living skills, to link with other services, to find a job or go back to school or whatever it is that they need. We also have 2 other Insync services that have transitional accommodation but also crisis accommodation, which is short-term accommodation up to 12 weeks for young people that require it. And we also do community programs where we work with young people in the community to help them with whatever they need help with.
So hi, I'm Teo and I'm a youth rep from QYHC. Definitely the one thing that I believe and myself need from Youth Homelessness Services is just a safe place to continue living and regrowing our sense of community in our local area, whether that be mental health support, finding a job, education, and just kind of having a second support system away from home that can be disrupted.
Great. Thank you so much. So yeah, that kind of gives you a bit of an insight of what's happening more globally in the space of youth housing, support services. And one of the main things I think that came from those videos as well is about that wraparound support, what we're exploring as well. So obviously this topic is a follow-on from the youth housing event we had back in April. And the theme was certainly around services and making sure that the young person is paired the accommodation that suits them with the right supports to make it happen and make it right for them to integrate fully into their community. So next, we have 2 speakers from Scotland. So we have a presentation by Rock Trust and Almond Housing Association. So I'm absolutely delighted to have them over. Almond Housing Association is a housing provider and Rock Trust is a service provider, and they would have coupled, but I'm sure they can kind of talk you through their journey in a bit more detail. So the 2 speakers that we have tonight from those 2 organisations are Audrey Heron, and she has worked within Scotland's youth homeless sector for the past 20 years, currently working with Rock Trust Scotland, a youth-specific homelessness charity. She's an experienced service manager and is passionate about supporting young people to build better futures and shares Rock Trust's vision to end youth homelessness in Scotland. So that's Audrey. And then I'll also introduce you to Tracy. Tracy Longworth is the Housing Support Manager at Almond Housing Association, who manage around 2,500 properties. Tracy has been in post since 2016, which was newly created to bring the association's vision of being a more compassionate organisation to fruition. And Tracy has been transformational within the organisation in establishing holistic support in a number of areas, including domestic abuse, safeguarding, food and fuel poverty, and housing first for youth. So with that, I'll welcome Audrey up first.
Hi there, so I'm a service manager with Rock Trust in Scotland. We are a youth homeless charity and we work with 16 to 25-year-olds. We started over 30 years ago in Scotland when locals had raised concerns about the amount of young people who were sleeping in church graveyards, and it became quickly evident that to meet the needs of these young people we needed not only to provide accommodation but also support. So Rock Trust started relatively small in Edinburgh and we now operate in 7 local authorities in Scotland. We provide a different range of different support models, including supported accommodation, visiting support, peer flatmates, emergency night stop, health and wellbeing, live and work, and we are also launching our new upstream prevention model in schools. We started Scotland's first Housing First for Youth programme in 2017 alongside Amend Housing, which I'm here to talk about today. So this is known as a staircase model, and it has been around in Scotland for quite some time. It's generally the journey that a person will take when they become homeless, and it has been a successful model for some and can work really well, but not for all, and certainly not for the most chaotic young people. A typical journey through homelessness may involve someone sleeping rough or sofa surfing before they move into hostel accommodation. They may then gain more longer-term shared or supported accommodation, and from here they need to prove their readiness to manage a tenancy before they will be given a permanent offer. With each stage comes a different set of rules. For example, they may not be allowed to have visitors or bring alcohol in. Doors may be locked at a certain time of night. They may be required to attend support visits or share facilities. And each step also requires the young person to build different sets of relationships and to tell their story over and over. So for the most chaotic young people, this was an impossible task. They would become stuck in a cycle of homelessness and they wouldn't get to the point where they were able to prove that they were going to be tenancy ready. So what Housing First for Youth does, it takes the young person from the first stages in homelessness straight into permanent accommodation, but with high intensity wraparound support. And this gives them a stable base to work from. This is particularly important for young people as they're at a critical point of development where stability and security are key. We're working with young people who've lost trust in services, so we don't expect this to be an easy journey. And our mantra along the bottom, whatever it takes for as long as it takes. The model itself is underpinned by 5 key principles. So access to housing with no preconditions. The tenancy and the support are separated. They don't lose the tenancy if they don't engage with the support. And crucially, this doesn't mean that the young person is immune from eviction. They have the same tenancy rights and responsibilities as other tenants, but if they are evicted, the support will move on with them. Youth choice. We want to give the young person as much choice as possible from the area that they live in to the type of tenancy and how often they engage with support. They can also disengage with support for periods of time. We also provide an additional £1,500 budget to enable the young person to personalise their home. And spending a day in IKEA with a young person who's never actually owned anything before can be a really nice way to start building a good relationship with their worker. Youth development. All our staff are experts in youth housing and homelessness. Every training they attend is looked at through the lens of the young person. And this allows staff to take a trauma-informed approach to support. And we try to remember also that young people should be out there having fun and not having to deal with major life decisions all the time, such as where they're going to live. An individual and client-driven support. So this is a relationship-based approach. It can be the most important part of the support. Support isn't time-limited, so we're aiming to be there for the long haul. We aim to be flexible and responsive in how the support is delivered, so we keep the caseloads capped at 7. And then we have social integration. Young people do have different needs from adults. They want to be near their communities and their social networks, but this will likely change over time. They may have no experience of managing relationships or being self-sufficient. So they may want to move home or change the area that they live, and the support will continue with them. So we started up our pilot as a proof of concept. We were fortunate to have like-minded partners in Amend Housing and the Housing First for Europe hub, who alongside Rock Trust were able to commit some funding to the project. We then set out to prove whether or not this works in the context of youth. This is a crucial step because at this point we really didn't know. We accessed further grant funding to increase the service to 12 spaces, and 3 years into the pilot we commissioned an external evaluation report. This was again funded by Almond Housing, the Hub and Rock Trust. Findings from the pilot were really positive. We found that 90% of young people sustained their tenancy, and considering this was the young people that we were working with that no one wanted to house, this was a great outcome. All young people described ways in which the relationship with their workers had led to positive changes in their lives. 86% of young people had said that their mental health and wellbeing had improved, and 38% of young people had begun to access education and training and employment. This was an unexpected outcome, considering that we were working with the most marginalised young people, those who were furthest away from the employment market. The full evaluation is on the Rock Trust website, so if you've got time, please read that. Did that go on? Did that change there? Sorry. So the key things in making this model a success were being able to collate our own data through this external robust review. This was crucial, and it meant that when grant funding and our self-funding came to an end, we were able to go to the local authority with a bit of leverage. We were also able to prove some evidence on social return on investment. So in Scotland, it can cost around £210,000 per year for one young person to be placed in secure residential care. Housing First for Youth will cost around £7,000 a year. West Lothian Council agreed to to provide finance for the pilot model and continue this with a mixture of social policy funding and rapid rehousing transition funding, and they increased this to 18 spaces. Once it was funded by one local authority, others could see the difference that it was making, so the other local authorities commissioned this directly. In 2022, Fife Council had commissioned 21 spaces, and a year later added a further 14 spaces to this. And this year, 2023, Glasgow City Council has commissioned 35 spaces. So there is a risk with any funder that we may be asked to alter the model, such as increasing the caseloads, but we're really passionate about sticking to the fidelity of the model, and this is because we know that it works. So anyone that's looking at starting up a new project, the main things I would say would be to take risks. This was a really big step for both Rock Trust and Almond. It was a huge risk and could have gone wrong. A lot of people thought that we were mad and were telling us that this wouldn't work. We took the learning, put in some self-funding and evaluation. These were all key steps, but the main success, I think, in getting us off the ground was the partnership that Rock Trust had with Almond Housing. Having shared visions and values and like-minded people who were willing to take risks and push the boundaries within their own systems, Tracy and Almond have been a huge asset in making this model a success in Scotland, and I know that this hasn't been easy. So Tracy will now talk to you about this from a housing perspective.
There we are. Many thanks for the invitation to speak at this event today, and I'm really delighted that Clúid have chosen this subject for their annual Simon Brooke Lecture, and that they're honouring the legacy of their highly regarded colleague in this way. And I'm going to start my presentation with a quick question. I'm not going to read it out because I'm very conscious of time. So that's my question to you all, okay? So, Housing First, as has been spoken about by Audrey and also by our Canadian colleagues, replaces the staircase model. And I think I want to put a different spin on that. And I believe that the staircase model works for housing providers. And it's one of the things that we have asked for. We want to be assured that people are tenancy ready before we house them in order to minimise our risk. So this project, it wasn't straightforward for Almond. We, like Clúid, had never taken such a risk before. We were, and we remain, a mainstream housing provider. And at this time, back in 2016, 2017, when the project came to fruition, we had no, and I mean no, experience of complex groups or working with support providers. And the idea of providing a Scottish secure tenancy to a young care leaver with indicators of complex need and no requirement to engage with support was met with a degree of concern, and that's me putting it very politely. So we've heard already what Housing First is, and I think from a a practical point of view, what we've learned at Almond is it recognises the need to be holistic, to be flexible, to be supportive, to be trauma-informed, and to be guided by the person rather than to fall into line with bureaucracy and procedure. And while it's based on a simple premise, that does not mean that it's simple to implement or to enact. It requires significant cultural change, and it requires services to adapt. It also demands an end to silos and a disregard of organisational boundaries. So, for us, the key features for Housing First were the provision of high-quality furniture. This gives an immediate sense of worth, determination and ownership from the beginning. A dedicated housing officer, this was really crucial. This ensured that we had a consistent housing management approach from Almond for all of our young people. A strong and honest partnership. We trust Rock Trust to support our Housing First tenants, and we've been delighted with their proactive, whatever it takes approach. And I believe that this is underpinned with an honest and open working relationship at every level between our two organisations. Financial investment, we've already spoken about that, and the adherence to principles, and this is really, really key. It's simply not Housing First without them. So these were some of the challenges that we had. Obviously, there was a new partnership, and they are never easy. I believe that housing and support professionals, we speak very different languages, and we often have different perspectives. And within the housing team at Almond, this has developed into an approach that I call elastic tolerance. And this working practice has rolled out across all of our work with, in particular, any tenants with vulnerabilities, and we work in a far more trauma-informed manner, and I think it's really benefited us as an organisation. Engagement was a concern, as I've already alluded to, and I was challenged about this model during its inception. And again, around that view that young people didn't need to engage with support. And again, I would flip that, and I would say, whose responsibility is it to engage with support? And in my view, it's the professional's responsibility. They need to find a way to work with that young person. And I've been proved to be correct. Not one young person in our project has refused the support that they were offered by Rock Trust. At the beginning of the project, the statutory response was really poor. There was a level of disbelief in the model itself from a number of different organisations. There was a misunderstanding of who the provision was for, and there was undisguised and open criticism about our potential tenants by organisations such as our local police force. We've had our difficulties. Antisocial behaviour, damage to property and rent arrears have all been a feature, and Housing First is not a panacea that makes all of these realities disappear. However, our housing officer and our support workers from Rock Trust work really hard to explore all avenues to address any difficulties that arise. And despite all of these issues, our community development forums remain really positive about this project and its impact. So, in answering the question that I posed at the beginning of the presentation, why should we? Why should we commit our resources to this? And my answer to you would be because we should. We all have a responsibility towards young people, and in particular this project was about young people leaving care, and the attitude that this is not our problem is no longer an option for us. At Almond, we sincerely committed to Housing First for Youth. We have every faith in our Rock Trust partners. We know that Housing First works, and we know that together we can make a profound difference. And we need other housing providers to follow our lead. To be frank, if Almond Housing Association can do this, other landlords can. And when we all do, we will make real and lasting change in the lives of our most vulnerable young people. Thank you very much.
Wow. That was absolutely incredible from both yourselves, Audrey and Tracy. I think you really get the passion and just your wealth of experience and knowledge as well. And I think something that stuck with me was whatever it takes for whatever long, whatever period it takes. And the real social impact and social mission that you're working towards, I think it's incredible. So thank you so much for your contributions. So next we have a presentation by Provivienda and Hogarsi from Spain. So we have two great speakers with us who we'll be talking to. So we have Damaris Barjas, and she is a social worker with a master's degree in migration. She has extensive experience in the field of migration, international protection, social housing and the coordination of social projects. She is a member of the strategic management team at Provivienda, where she joined in 2022 as the director of planning. And then we also have Marina Calvo, who is the team leader within the Housing First for Youth programme in Spain, which has been implemented across two cities in Palma de Mallorca and Madrid. And in this role, Marina leads the pilot project in Palma de Mallorca. So I'd like to welcome the two of you up to present. So thank you very much for being with us tonight.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Clúid, for the presentation and the invitation here. We wanted to represent our partnership by being together on stage as well. I want to introduce our organizations. We are a service provider and a housing provider, which also develop different other services and projects. But we decided to form an alliance and a partnership since 2017. And I will explain that later, to join forces and use our expertise and to, be more successful and reach our goals. Hogarsi, our alliance is so strong that I'm going to introduce Hogarsi. Excuse my English. Hogarsi is a social, non-profit, independent, plural and statewide entity, and their goal is to eradicate homelessness. So they act in different locations in Spain, and they develop a wide activity very focused on eradicating homelessness. And Provivienda is also a non-profit dedicated to ensure all people enjoy the right to housing through different projects. And since this year, we decided also to launch a housing association, which is something not very extended in Spain, a country with 2.5% of social housing, which is very low compared to the rest of Europe. So we wanted to make a step on that and use our partnership to also join forces and the growth of this project on social housing. The history of our partnership is also linked to different social contexts. In 2017, we developed this partnership to develop the Housing First model in Spain. Later in 2019, we decided also to engage in other projects involving public administration, specifically on engaging in the housing services, not only social services, in developing services for the most vulnerable. So we developed different programs. And in 2022, with the Next Generation funds, we started again a huge project, two projects actually, and Marina is going to explain one of them, with EU funds to pilot a project on deinstitutionalization and another one to pilot the Housing First for Youth in Spain with a specific context and some specificities that needs to be done in Spain, which we will explain also later. This strategic alliance for the provision is, as I said, to join forces. We gained mutual learnings from each other's specialization. We shared knowledge, we shared resources, and it needed lots of trust and respect and joint responsibility. For some of the projects, we joined forces in a joint venture. For some others, just going together with different projects with a common goal. But we also boosted networking doing so and reached new stakeholders and funding. We did also joint advocacy, so we prepared policy papers together in Spain. We also were also involved with some policy and, for example, right to housing bill, which was passed in Spain this year. We prepared lots of documents and worked together, joining forces. When we developed our strategic alliance in 2017 and we start to develop the Housing First model in Spain, we divided tasks in teams. Provivienda, who also develops projects with social intervention, provided housing, and Hogar Sí, the socio-educational support team. So each one of us separated tasks, which has been an issue, in their speciality, and reached agreements to make it more effective, because it's a task with advantages but also with some risks. We had to learn how to manage initial confusion among teams, and some also with sponsors, some overlaps in teams, some possible frictions with the teams when defining priorities and red lines, and some clients' disengagement from one of the services and the other team having to understand what was happening. But among the advantages, it was good to emphasize the independence between housing and support for the client, which for us was the key in this separation of services. So we had two different professionals. It was two different negotiations, but both was client-centric. We had independence to manage housing and the relationship with landlords, because we worked with housing from the private market, and we needed to take care of the landlord as our client. Each organization developed specialized training and recruitment of their own professionals, and optimized resources, increasing capacity to raise more. Among some of the risks, we had this feeling of losing control of the whole project, because we had to negotiate every step, even our relationships with the funders. But it was successful. This year, we looked back, and we didn't remember when it all started, and we thought, well, as in a marriage, when you have to think when it all started, maybe we need to talk. So we talked, and we had an 8-month discussion with our general managers to evaluate how it was working, validate it, and then agree on the work ahead. And it was very fruitful, because we had our ups and downs in our relationship linked to priorities or focus on housing treatment and support services. But in the end, we were satisfied with the results and the autonomy of the clients. So we decided to develop new projects in this strategic partnership, and also decided to try to engage more people and more organizations in the same model. So we plan to develop more common position papers and strategies to communicate and advocate. We want to escalate projects and reach new contexts and needs. And we want to place a specific focus on early care, which is a finding that we had from this year's project on deinstitutionalization. We had a huge gap in early care and prevention projects, and surely we will develop together more projects on that. And also we needed to define our housing provision model for the partnership. The two organizations are developing different strategies to gain housing and amplify our market stock, our housing stock. But they both run together, but we need to define a model not to interfere in the projects that we develop together. The context, focusing on youth, the context in Spain, and Marina is going to explain it better with her enthusiasm in working with young people. Just to give you some figures, this is the housing situation for young people in Spain. they have to dedicate 83% of the salary to pay the rent. The youth emancipation age is more than 3 years higher than in the rest of the European average. But I know the situation is changing all over Europe in terms of youth emancipation due to the housing crisis. But 17% of young people are in trouble to pay rent. You have some scales there. And 1 out of 5 under 29 years is in risk of poverty and exclusion. In this housing crisis, well, we have this structural crisis in housing due to housing prices, the low wages and precariousness and unemployment, and the lack of social and affordable housing. As I said, 2.5% of affordable housing is not enough for the figures that we have in homelessness and in poverty rates in Spain. Still, we have a good opportunity now with this housing bill, with national strategies to combat homelessness, national strategy for the deinstitutionalization, and we have some programs, state programs to finance the acquisition and developing of social housing in the country. But many autonomous regions are not yet taking advantage of this financial opportunity, so we still have a long way to go. This is the housing tenancy among young people. So most of them rent, the property in young people decreased over the years, and the rental prices are going up. And so Marina is going to explain the project that we are developing on the Housing First for Youth.
Thank you very much. It's an honor to be here, so thank you for having us. I've been new in the project. I've been just 1 year, and it's a pilot. And yeah, I guess that I can say that I'm passionate to do this right. Some facts is like homelessness is increasing in the last 10 years in the whole Europe, also in Spain. But what for me is dramatically concerning is like 21.1% is young people between 18 and 29 years old. That was mentioned before, are facing other difficulties like lack of employability, risk of poverty or unemployment. It is also true that we also don't have the right support, or the services that are there are inadequate or not sufficient. We are 43 shortage in accommodation places. Also, I don't think that are the desirable ones. We have a lot of collective shelters, and we are really needing more housing. And also, we face a poor professionalization in our country. Wages are not amazing, and people eventually need to make their living. iFuturo is how we call our way to make housing first for youth in Spain, basically because we have some particularities and difficulties. But we pretend to test if housing first for youth is the best methodology to tackle youth homelessness. Basically, we want to prove if it's the most effective and efficient way to tackle this. And for that, we are offering a housing first step. And we have right now 105 young people living in their own houses. We are participating in the international community. We have an international community that we are exchanging ideas and values. We have also two public administration involved, that are the Council of Mallorca and also the Council of Madrid. And we really believe in generates evidence. We are creating a toolbox modeling to prove that is the most effective and most efficient way. The project map, basically we have 105 people between 18 and 25 years old. The 20% of them are women. Basically they are sleeping rough or using some shelter or homelessness accommodation. And we are offering diverse housing solutions, but also we are offering them support-based in Housing First for Youth projects principles. housing support, digital inclusion, employment services, and self-directed support budgeting. And we have talked way too much about the principles and why are important, but for us, I guess that our risk and challenge is like we cannot offer support forever. Our project is going to end, and we have a date, ends in December 24. So by then, we need to prove, we need to make sure that our young people is able to maintain their autonomy, they are able to succeed, and they are not going to end up in homelessness again. We developed a youth trauma-informed practice basically because it was something that it was not there before, and because of that reason, we focus on autonomy, how we can help them to, particularly the people that comes from the care system, to the institutionalized and being able to thrive and have the life that they want to have. Our core principles, for sure, are really familiar for you. Basically, we are going to work in promoting autonomy, in a person-centered approach, community inclusion, recovery, a strength-based approach, gender-focused, trauma-informed service, youth voice, harm reduction, and housing and treatment segregation. Even though that word, treatment, made me feel uncomfortable right now. Our goals, what we expect to achieve is like 50% of our people is able to maintain their autonomy, and 80% is going to be engaging with employment services, 50% of that people is going to find unemployment, and also at least 80% are going to improve their digital skills. I truly believe that we are going to overrate these goals, or this goal we pretend to achieve. The typology of housing is mentioned here basically because maybe we are a bit different from Scotland or Ireland in that we, as Damaris explained, we don't have basically social housing, and we find housing in the public and private market, both, but mostly in the private market, which means that we compete with a lot of people, particularly in Mallorca. That is a really touristic place. We are offering them one-room flat, but also sharing housing, and we have up to 3-bedroom flats. It has to be accessible, fully equipped, integrated in the community, connecting with services, close to public transport, energy efficient. And yeah, that's something that I was talking with Damaris before that I don't know exactly how to explain, because Provivienda or Hogarsi holds the tenure of because of issues in the legal system. Someone has to, they have their rights and the responsibilities. The house is theirs, but it's on our name. I don't know if it's clear enough, but I try. Our achievements so far is like we work towards the institute. Well, I cannot say that word in Spanish, so. Support based in competence and not in ratios. As you were mentioned already before, is working with young people is different, and it's really amazing and really fun, but also includes risk management, crisis, and intensity in the good and the bad way. So we are working in competence and the qualities, the needs of the people, and what we have in our teams. We also get our service, our teams. Workforce is involved in agile methodology. We developed this line of trauma with young people that we're supposed to have a product quite soon. And we are exploring actually with Canada how help them to develop natural support and get integrated in the community, because at the end of the day, being connected is positive for everyone, and it's going to be one of the best options to don't end up in homelessness again, but also it's increasing the rates in self-esteem, in being happy, in being successful in other parts of their lives. Even if I'm passionate, we face some challenges too. We need this idea of the institute, into the political agenda, and that there are resources into that. We also need focus in early intervention. I believe that if we do the work right, if we offer the right support, we ended up not having housing first clients in 20 years. Autonomous exit for us is mandatory. We have a clock in our backs, and we want to tell the young people, that's your time to be happy, to play, to try things, but at the same time, it's like, hey, the reality is here. We don't want the project ends and you ended up in homelessness again. We developed an ambition strategy about upskilling and reskilling, and we are getting involved a lot of people and also the public administrations, because if we want to change something, we need to change the views of the people that are making laws and housing. And what is needed to exit homelessness? Housing. It's been proven that it was not enough, particularly with young people. The right support, financial support, and also this sense of community, to being connected. I think that, as you were saying before, we need to ask ourselves, are we providing the right support? Because if not, well, we need to find other ways to support the young people. It's us, not them. And yeah, I think that's us. Thank you very much.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Marina and Damaris as well. I think so much knowledge and insight around the pilot that you're running, the figures, and just the one thing you said as well is making sure that there's a right setup in terms of the supports, that there is access to employment, opportunities, education, to make sure that the tenancy is sustained, and that there is that integration and that it's successful. So thank you so much for contribution. So the last speaker of the evening is Hilma Sormunen from NAL, from Finland, and she works as an advocacy specialist at the Finnish Youth Housing Association. NAL is a non-governmental, non-for-profit central organisation comprising of 23 local associations dedicated to advocating for the housing policy interests of young people in Finland. NAL owns 2 companies, one involved in the construction and rental of youth apartments, and the other providing social services for young people. So this presentation is going to be slightly different to the other 2, which focused on the more partnership things, but this model is very different as well. It has an advocacy wing to it, which is really, really exciting to hear about. So I'll bring up Hilma.
Okay, good evening, everyone. Thank you for inviting me here today. Thank you to the previous speakers also. Let's see. Well, Claire already introduced us very well, so maybe let's not go through the slide, but there you can see our country and a little bit where our local associations are based. So we are pretty spread out in the country. So a little bit how we got into youth housing. So NAL started out as an advocacy group or advocacy organization in 1971. Then NAL was just advocating for the need of youth housing and just bringing forth the need that young people need houses and that there exists youth homelessness in Finland. But then as time went on, they realized that it's not enough just to advocate, but young people actually do need houses, homes, and NAL also needs to start to provide them for young people. So our company, NAL Asunnot, was established in 1993. And then they realized that it's not still enough, and young people need services to help them lead independent lives. So the second company, NAL Palvelut, NAL Services, was established in 2009. So our mission is, preventing youth homelessness and ensuring every young person has a home that they enjoy living in. And what we do advocacy, like stated. We want to ensure that young people's interests are considered in political decision making. We want to really emphasize the importance of youth housing so that every political decision maker also knows this. Like we said, we construct and lease youth apartments. We provide support services for youth. We also have a project that helps young people with criminal backgrounds to help them find homes and the services that they need. We educate and share information to youth and professionals working with youth. And we support our local associations and we develop best practices with them to really uphold the quality of youth housing that we offer and that we have in Finland. Together with our local associations, we have over 4,500 youth housing apartments in 30 different regions in Finland, and then our company owns around 2,500 apartments, mainly in Helsinki metropolitan area and the surrounding cities. We get financing from the government to construct. And really our approach to youth housing is to focus in the needs of young people. So we're thinking about where young people want to live in. We want to think about do they have access to public transportation from where their houses are. Young people also want access to nature. So all of these we consider when thinking about where to build youth housing. Mostly the homes or apartments that we offer are studios, but then there are also bigger ones. Our target group is young adults under the age of 30, and the leases are fixed term until the tenant turns 35. We've found that young people tend to change flats quite often. The average amount that a young person would stay in one of our flats is about 2.5 years. So that maybe says something about how quickly the situations of young people really change. 15% of the apartments are reserved for tenants who are in need of special support. Maybe a word about the rents, how we try to keep them affordable, because Null Apartments is a non-profit company, and we also get the funding from this Housing Finance and Development Centre. The rents are determined on the basis of cost rent, so that rents are only as much as needed to cover the costs of construction and maintenance, repairs and everything, which has been, a struggle lately because all of the costs of this are rising, so it's very difficult to really keep the rents affordable to everyone. And maybe a point about the tenants. When a young person applies for our apartments, we ask them about their need for residence. Last year, these are numbers from last year, 17.4% stated homelessness as their reason to need housing, and 32% said that's transition to independence or independent living. One concerning trend that we have been noticing is that our tenants are getting poorer and coming from more disadvantaged backgrounds. Here we can see that last year 53.3% of the tenants earned less than €1,000 per month, which just really clarifies the need for youth, for affordable housing for youth, because these people would have a very rough time trying to find a home from the private market. So as part of our housing, we have this responsible residence selection process, which really comes from the Housing Finance and Development Centre that finances the constructing. So the idea is that priority is always given to those who have the most acute need for accommodation. So always when thinking about who gets what apartment, we are thinking about who needs it the most. This has very much to do with homelessness prevention. And the goal is also to avoid segregation and concentration of social problems. This is also a very important part about the responsible residence selection process. A central part in our housing is early intervention and prevention. So there are support available for young people. And we also want to promote youth participation in the decision-making of the housing community. We have resident committees that are consulted before constructing new youth housing, and young people are given the opportunity to really be involved in the decision-making of the housing community and the houses that they live in. So there is this very intentional work being done to prevent rental debts from increasing, to prevent disturbances. So this all the goal of this is to prevent evictions, which is, of course, a very important goal. And the work has so far been very successful because in our apartments there's a very low amount of evictions, which is important. And we've found that, especially lately, our apartments can be really the last resort to many young people, because we don't require security deposit or a home insurance, and we can even offer apartments to young people with payment default or rental debt. All of these would make, again, it very difficult for a young person to find a home in the private market. We've discussed services quite a lot already, so I will just maybe give a short overview that our company offers services, and our local associations offer services such as floating support, housing counselling, supported housing, family support services. Family support services have been growing lately a lot. And the goal is to really give young people concrete and individual support, that kind of support that the individual young person really needs to tackle their individual issues. Then a quick overview about the homelessness situation in Finland. We are one of the only, or maybe even the only country in Europe where homelessness has been decreasing. There we see statistics given to us by the Housing Finance and Development Centre of Finland. So maybe something to note, last year 815 young people were experiencing homelessness in Finland. We did see an increase from the previous year, which was, of course, a little bit concerning to us. There was about increase of around 100 young people. And of course, because of hidden homelessness, we don't actually know how many young people are experiencing homelessness in Finland, but that are their statistics. How we address homelessness in Finland, and maybe our recommendations on how others could also do it, is of course housing first approach. So we give people homes and we give them services. This simplified affordable housing. There needs to be enough affordable housing so people will not be able to find homes that fit their budgets. We need to have accessible support and services. We need to make the services so that people have an easy time accessing them. And also one point that relates to this is breaking the stigma of homelessness and mental health issues and substance abuse issues and everything, so that people would have the lowest possible threshold there is to access these services. Social security system, the support of the society is very important in decreasing homelessness. Welfare, housing allowance, all of this is very important for young people to be able to pay their rents. And advocacy is important. We need to be able to influence decision making. We in Finland are lucky in the sense that we have a very long-standing shared political understanding that homelessness is thing we should tackle, and that we are all striving towards a society where no one would be experiencing homelessness, but the politicians or other decision makers, they might not know what is needed to achieve this. They might not know what kind of resources are needed, what kind of services are needed. So this is very much important that we share this knowledge and we influence them to see that youth housing is important. And then statistics and documentation is important so that we know what we are dealing with, what we can do better. And this is one point that in Finland we also need to do better. We need to know more about youth homelessness and hidden homelessness so that we can improve our work also. Just a quick point to further about advocacy. We do a lot of cooperation between different organization networks and everything in Finland. We can all achieve the most when we work together, so we do really encourage this. And then a short point about the current and future concerns that we have right now. We have a newish government who is planning cuts to social security and to the funding of social services and the construction of affordable housing. So these are all very serious concerns that we have for the future situation of homelessness in Finland. The rising housing and living costs, rising construction costs, more problems and concerns, and then youth well-being issues. Finland is often credited as the happiest country in the world, but we do have a lot of young people who are not well. There's a rise of inequality in our society, and this is a really big concern for the future of our young people. The future. We have to, in order to really prevent homelessness and youth homelessness specifically, we need to ensure that young people have enough affordable housing options and that they have the means to cover their rent expenses. Every society probably has their own ways to ensure this, but this is, of course, very important. We at NAL, we want to increase dialogue with young people and involve them even stronger in the projects related to youth housing. And this is also what we recommend to other organizations, that they involve young people very strongly in their work and their projects, even in the planning stages. And then we really need to improve the well-being of youth and combat social inequality. We need to always remember, who are we doing this for? So we need to listen to young people, we need to take good care of young people so that we can provide them with housing that really meets their needs and really tackle all other issues that might be affecting their ability to lead independent lives. I think I'll leave you with that. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Hilma. That was fantastic. I think from you speaking, I can't get over how young people friendly what you do is, just in terms of accesses to services, the rent setting, having that kind of cost rental factor, and the early intervention prevention as well. And it just seems so. I think every country should be striving towards the model that you have in terms of ending youth homelessness. So that's incredible. Thank you so much for that. And then advocacy as well, obviously, is a real big factor as well in terms of giving residents and young people a voice in decision making and that co-creation piece as well. So thank you so much for your input. So now, before we go to the panel discussion, and I'm sure you all have burning questions to ask, we have a second video. This is again to give all attendees as much information as possible. So we have a second video from New Zealand. So we will play that now.
Kia ora te whānau, ko Maraia Tahire Mokaraka tōku nei ingoa. Ki te tao tuku pāpā, ko Ngāpuhi, te aroa Ngāti Whakaue, Ngāti Hainamananga iwi. Ki te tao tuku māma, ko Ngāti Whātua Rākei, Tainuanga iwi. Tēnā koutou katoa. So kia ora everybody, my name is Maraia. I'm the service lead for youth housing in Tamaki Makaurau, Auckland. So LifeWise partners with two other trusts, but LifeWise provides the social arm and the social services alongside APT, which is Airedale Property, and Methodist Mission Northern. The Methodist Mission Northern have been around for around 150 years in the Auckland CBD, and they've provided food and shelter to a lot of those people who have been affected by poverty and social injustice. So currently I lead a staff of 12 youth development workers who work alongside rangatahi who are experiencing homelessness. They've been living on the street or couch surfing, or they've had a whānau breakdown.
Tēnā koutou katoa, ko Kirioke te maunga, ko Punaki Tere te awa, ko ngā toki mata whaurua te waka, ko Ngāti Tautahi te hapu, ko ngā pui nui tonu te iwi, ko Mahia Mokaraka tōku ingoa. Greetings everyone, my name is Mahia Tahira Mokaraka. I am a LifeWise Youth Housing Team Leader. LifeWise Youth Housing provide housing support for young people from the ages of 16 to 24 years old. We, as a service, work alongside Airedale Property Trust, who are our sister organisation, and we support young people to sustain their tenancy while they're in our program, and part of that is to provide wraparound support for independent living. The goal for our service is for our youth development workers to support the young people in our program to achieve their goals. Part to that is financial literacy or budgeting and getting their licenses, their identification, and ensuring that they have everything that they need to live independently once they graduate from our program.
So we are funded by Oranga Tamariki, Ministry for Children, and also MHUD, which is the Ministry of Housing. We're also really lucky to get some funding through some grants, and that allows us to provide activity-based groups for our young people. There are a whole bunch of other things that we can provide our young people with through this funding.
What I have noticed in my almost 20 years of working with young people is that young people have unfortunately had some bad experiences with services, with health professionals, with people in general. And the great thing about what we're doing is trying to give our young people a positive experience with youth workers and give them an opportunity to experience what great support is from people that care for them.
So a lot of our young people, they come with a lot of trauma, and that might also include mental health distress or substance use. And we try to be as trauma-informed as we can to understand that is something that they have experienced, but also to provide them avenues of support and treatment while they're with us. Kia ora, Raya.
Hello.
Thanks for being with us today. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself, where you're from, how old you are?
My name's Raya, I'm 20, and I currently stay in West Auckland.
How long have you been in youth housing services for?
Roughly 5 years.
Can you tell me how you came into the service?
So I was referred by my social worker when I was under the care of Oranga Tamariki. I was kind of all over the place, so I didn't really have a stable place. I was on the streets as well as couch surfing.
What was it like when you were given a space for yourself? You were given a unit to live in.
I was happy as, having like my own place, stability, I guess. I think the best thing about it was being able to set up the place how I wanted, and knowing that the kitchen, the bathroom, the bedroom, all of it was my space. I've never really had a home because I've been in Oranga Tamariki since I was a baby, and so I went from caregiver to caregiver, and then I ended up in youth jail. When I first entered LifeWise, I was there for like a year or so, and then I got evicted because of my own actions. I reached back out to my old key worker who was with LifeWise, obviously, and I told her about my situation, and then she brought me back into the program.
Raya, can you tell us about your journey since being with youth housing?
It's been an up and down type of journey, I guess. It's been good and bad. I've learned more skills like budgeting, getting myself out there more, like going studying. I think some of the challenging pieces were not getting along with all of the youth as well as the staff. Because being in the system, we kind of looked at social workers or anyone that was a professional. Well, that's how I looked at them, as like not nice people. So I would automatically have a defense up and would push people away.
So what about now, Rhea? What are you currently doing?
I study health and wellbeing. For me, it's just a stepping stone into something a bit bigger. So I want to be a nurse. I want to get these qualifications because I want to look after my nan, and she's almost at that age where she's going to need a bit of support. So, yeah, I want to be the one that looks after her.
Youth housing is, it can be quite difficult. You know, our young people's journey isn't linear. It can be like a wave. It's up and down, up and down. And I think it's really important that we continue to support our rangatahi, no matter where they are in their journey. Even, for example, with Rhea, she was evicted, but that was used as a learning tool and another opportunity for her to come back into the service so that she can continue her housing journey. I think what's important there is that we never close our doors on our rangatahi. Unfortunately, they might not all be able to come back, but that support and that aftercare is always there for them.
Perfect. Okay. I think certainly from that video, I think Rhea's story is just so like it's so motivating and so empowering to watch. And I think there was a lot of insights and learnings for attendees here from that video. So now we're moving over to the panel discussion and the Q&A. But before we do that, I'd like to introduce Andrew Daly. He'll probably hate me for doing this. But he's the second half of the policy team. We're a team of 2 people. And he's put so much hard work, effort and energy, motivation, passion into the Simon Brooke Lecture. And he really deserves gratitude and thanks as well. And he certainly helped me when Clúid, and we've had fantastic conversations about politics and everything. We're yet to find a topic we haven't agreed on. But I'd like to welcome Andrew Daly, and we'll start the panel discussion and Q&A.
Good evening, everyone. So we're running fairly behind time, so I might invite the speakers to just take their place at the stage while I do my little bit here. So as Claire mentioned, my name's Andrew Daly. I'm the Policy and Research Coordinator with Clúid, and I would say that event planning is usually the least favourite part of my job. I don't particularly like doing it, but this event is an exception. The reason that it's an exception is because I credit Simon Brooke with sparking my interest in housing. Simon was one of my lecturers in college. I had him in my first year for Introduction to Housing Policy. I think it was clear to all of us that Simon was a practitioner as well as an academic, that the issues he was covering were not just abstract ideas. Rather, Simon was acutely aware of the ways homelessness and housing insecurity impact on real people's lives. Simon's work still shapes what we do at Clúid. When embarking on a new project, a good first step is always to ask, did Simon do a paper on this? Invariably, the answer is yes, and the things that he wrote tend to be as relevant today as they were when they were first written. I think the continued relevance in Simon's work speaks both to his skill as a policy analyst, but also to the frustratingly slow pace of progress when it comes to certain housing issues. So we're joined back up at the top by our speakers from earlier. I think we're also have Adam Spollin. Adam is with Focus Ireland and the Coalition to End Youth Homelessness, and we're also joined by Ian Doyle from TUSLA. So because we're running so over time, I am going to selflessly yield the floor and give up my questions, which you'll have to trust me, they were incredibly insightful. But yeah, I think we'll go straight to the audience to see if anyone has any questions. So Fiona, would you like to grab a microphone and see if anyone has any questions? Yeah, throw the hands up.
First question.
Hi, I'd like to just ask a question of the woman from Finland. Was there any significant difference in the units you provided for people with disability? Or are they just the same units? Has there been any adaptation? Is it specifically for physical disability or for people with intellectual disability? How are they treated? Are they any different going into your service?
Thanks. That's a great question, and I actually have to say that I'm not sure because I don't work for the company. All I know is that we do cooperate with associations and organizations that work with people with disabilities, so that the 15% of the apartments that I mentioned that are reserved for people with a need for special support are more they are the young people who need help with, for example, mental health issues or substance abuse issues or just general life skills. So our focus group doesn't really involve people with disabilities that strongly, so far as I know, but we do work with organizations and associations that really do focus and work with people with disabilities.
I think before we take another question from the floor, I'll give you a little bit more time to think. We might go to Adam and Ian just to give a response to some of the information that we've heard today from an Irish perspective. So if you'd like to kick off there, Adam.
Yeah, absolutely. So I suppose as you mentioned, I'm currently chair of the Irish Coalition to End Youth Homelessness. And obviously we were partly inspired by the achievements of our international colleagues in our formation, like Away Home Canada that we heard from earlier. And a huge cornerstone of the coalition has been the power of effective cooperation and collaboration. So it's been really great to hear about the different forms of partnerships that are currently in operation from our international colleagues. We're at a bit of a transitional stage, which is a really positive transitional stage with the coalition. In the last 12 months, we've seen the publication of a youth homelessness strategy. We were invited to be on the steering group, which will work on the implementation of that strategy. And as well, at the start of this year, we welcomed Clúid Housing as our newest member, which was Clúid are the first of the larger approved housing bodies to join the coalition. So we're at a really, really hopeful stage, and I suppose seeing the great examples of international best practice, some of which we are trying to import at the moment to an Irish context, it does fill us with hope, I suppose, at a time when I know Brian mentioned that we're seeing youth homelessness rise at a really disproportionate rate. I might pass over to Jean.
Thank you. I'm Ian Doyle. I'm the aftercare manager in Dublin North City. So I suppose my area of knowledge would be pretty much around what's happening on the north side of the Liffey. But I suppose just to give a wider perspective about the numbers of young people that are currently in aftercare, we've got over 3,000 young people that are currently availing of the aftercare service. TUSLA is currently looking at our strategy, and one of the 5 areas that we're looking at is accommodation. We've had quite an extensive consultation with young people and other service providers, and just some of the feedback that we've got, especially from our young people, is that they've been, quite positive about the aftercare services that they have experienced. On the negative side of it, and I think what we really need to do is we need to really listen to our young people, is that they see aftercare as very much a 2-tier type of service where we do really well at supporting, I think, and this will be echoed from our young people, that we do really well at supporting our young people that are in accommodation. When I was walking downtown, I was kind of seeing the kind of huge new student accommodation blocks that are up there, and we're funding a lot of our young people that are in education, and they're living there, and they very much identify as students and are living there. So we're doing well with that, whereas we're not doing well, and our young people have have told us, and hopefully our strategy, which is we're very early into it, like it's 2023 to 26. They told us that the kind of two tiers, that under the aftercare policy, aftercare support stops at 23, but it stops at 21 for young people that are not in full-time education. Our young people that are in full-time education, they're financially supported. As I say, we're supporting young people, in the student accommodation, and as everyone knows, and if anyone that has students in these, they're expensive, but it's really worth the investment in our young people that are there. So again, there's a lot of things that we're doing well, and our young people would say that one big thing is that we're listening. And I suppose from an aftercare service, hanging in there, just from what the New Zealand presentation was saying, was that for a lot of our young people, it's this accelerated, growth through into adulthood. Whereas, with our own kids and stuff, like, we don't expect them to leave home at 8 a.m. Whereas in our care system, our young people, and I've got a lot of the young people that I'm working with and I've known for years, could have been, in care from a very young age. By the time of 18, we're kind of accelerating them to move into aftercare. And I know as a service, when I was a frontline aftercare worker and going out to meet a young person at the age 16 and 17, that would be very unnerving for them to talk about moving on for somewhere that they live. So there's a lot of issues, and I suppose I'm really encouraged about, I suppose the word that I'm hearing here is partnership. And one thing that I really learned, I won't hog up the time, but one thing I really learned is that aftercare is not just about TUSLA and about TUSLA providing supports. As the corporate parents, we have a huge role, and I'm not going to try to dilute that role, but even talking with some of the colleagues here, we have to work in partnership to make this work for our young people, and that's something that I'm very encouraged, and I've getting names and getting contacts. I'm really, from here the real work starts. So I'm very, very encouraged that kind of Clúid's involved. We've had a long history of working with the Peter McVerry Trust, Focus Ireland, Don Bosco, and other voluntary organisations. The partnership, and we really need to make it work for our young people.
Thanks a million for that. Brian, you have a question?
Yeah, I was just going to ask Marina and Damaris, just in terms of, can you just talk about your support is time and housing is time limited? Can you maybe talk a little bit about that, and just the skills programs and how successful they are in terms of people, youth or young adults going into employment afterwards? Has it been successful?
Yeah, thank you, Brian. With the time is limited, we are focusing on this specific project funded by the Next Generation funds. We have all the projects also time limited, but only in terms of funds. People has been staying in the homes for years now. But this specific Housing First for Youth pilot in Spain is a three-year time. So we are currently working with the public administrations in terms of sustainability to transfer the project to them. We are still in negotiations, very nervous because we needed to work and to be successful. And in terms of the second question was, sorry?
You talked about digital skills and other skills that and how successful they've been in terms of employability and so on.
Yeah, Marina, maybe you can.
Well, I guess that is quite early to say because we just did intermediate evaluation now, and the results are going to be shared next week or something like that. But we need to recall evidence that this is working. It is true that numbers of employability in Mallorca are quite good, but it is also true that we have this touristic kind of seasonal type of work. But we just can keep trying and be positive.
We are developing an app and a system to evaluate their digital competences, because we know young people are really competent more than us in digital apps. but sometimes not specific for employment and job seeking or having a good use of them. So we are piloting also an app also to check their own abilities to manage home, manage their own calendar, their agenda, going to job interviews and all that. So it's a specific app, and we are evaluating their competencies. But that's the.
Any more questions from the floor? Yeah, a couple up there.
Thank you. A question for Tracy and connected into Audrey. Tracy, the partnership that you have with Rock Trust, your accommodation, is that sort of a specific allocation of general accommodation that you allocate for the Rock Trust? It's a bit two-pronged, or is it specifically built for the project? And separately, what size is the typical project unit per individual that it might be allocated to?
Thank you for your question. Yes, it's our standard property that we have. We didn't do any new build programme for the Housing First project. The location is down to as much as we can, the choice of the young person. And in the main, we try to allocate one-bedroom properties, but we don't have a huge stock of one-bedroom properties. So in the first sort of tranche of it, there were a number of two-bedroom properties that were allocated. Interestingly, this project's evolved because it started in 2017, and a number of our young people, because they've thrived and really developed their independence and their living skills, they formed relationships, they've had children, and we have facilitated them moving into different types of accommodation that suits their changing needs. So that's how we've approached it. I don't know if you want to say anything more, Audrey? I think you've covered it.
Yeah. Hi, guys. So this is a question for both service providers and housing provision providers down there. I think, Tracy, you said it in your piece there around the risk and the hesitation of kind of going into housing first. What would be your advice for a housing organisation that might be looking at kind of getting into that space? What would be your advice around it? And you basically like what you've noticed, and like what would you advise?
I think my advice for any housing organisation that was considering doing a Housing First project is to find a support provider that you can build a positive relationship with, that you will trust that each part of the project will do and commit to doing what they say that they're going to do. As far as the risks, there's always risks with housing anybody. And I think within housing, we've historically always had a level of fear around housing young people. And what this project has demonstrated is that even those young people with the highest sort of risk factors associated with them, and be under no doubt that all of these things happened, and they happened, they happened on scale often, and we had to have a really robust response. But the response we had was a joint one, and we worked in close partnership with the support providers. We had a joint approach to our young people. And interestingly, when I was saying about the resistance we had around this project, and particularly around the local police force, who were horrified when they found out, in particular, one of the young people that we were going to house, after we'd housed that young person and they'd been living with us for a period of time, we had some community concerns. That police inspector himself became one of our most outstanding supporters of Housing First. So it's really interesting how things can change. But overall, it's that partnership. It's that relationship with your support provider, and it's a relationship with the young people. because it's around building trust and confidence with them, because they're so used to things ending and things not working out, and they started to believe us that we weren't going anywhere, and we haven't, and that's been really imperative to the project working. That stickability and tenacity around meaning what we say and doing what we say as well. Does that answer the question? Audrey would like to add something.
Hi there. I just wanted to add, one of the things I always want to reiterate to a housing provider is that these young people, if they're not part of Housing First, they will be part of mainstream housing, so they do have a right to be housed anyway. So they may be housed in your accommodations or in your area through normal mainstream housing. However, this means they're going to be housed without this high intensity wraparound support. So what one would you prefer, you know?
Yeah, I think we're out of time, unfortunately. So if any of you think of any questions after the fact, feel free to get in touch with myself or Claire. We'll pass on your questions to the speakers and we'll try to get back to you with an answer. Thank you.
Thank you all so much to our panellists again. That was really insightful, and thank you for your questions and the contributions as well. So the next speaker that we have is Karina Chapman, and Karina is she is a 22-year-old working and studying in Galway City. She's currently pursuing a BA in government after growing up in the care of the Irish state and being heavily involved in youth work and activism through the organisation Froga. She hopes to work in policy change to make a difference for those classes marginalised in her country. And just on a side note, I actually heard Karina speak at one of the events that the Coalition to End Youth Homelessness organised, and I think it's so important that you're here today. So thank you so much for about to share your story. We're absolutely delighted to have you here. Thank you. Karina.
Okay, so I have my contacts in for my first time and I printed it a bit small, so you will have to forgive me if I pause for a moment. But tróna má chairde agus gur mágat a chora a thuirt stom leirtin seoniu. My name is Karina Chapman. I'm a 22-year-old student in the aftercare system, working and living in Galway City. Although I'm blessed to say I've never spent a night without a roof over my head, being a young person growing up as a child of the Irish state, or simply being a young person renting in this country without a family support system to fall back on, I cannot count the amount of sleepless nights I've had worrying about where my next home would be. Throughout my childhood and adolescence, I moved to 11 alleged permanent foster homes, scattered between Mayo, Sligo and Clare, never forgetting the numerous respite accommodations where days or weeks would be spent in limbo as I waited to be found out where I'd be allocated next. My first adult experience with the Irish housing market occurred in August 2019. At the age of 18, 2 weeks before my leaving certificate year began, I was abruptly moved into independent living. I had already been informed by my aftercare worker about the social welfare allowance given to young people who have aged out of the care system up until the age of 23 on the condition that they continue with their education, which gave me a slight peace of mind in regarding finance. And during the house hunting stage, I was very fortunate to have my aftercare worker with me to educate me on the different steps involved with renting for the first time. Although the basics now may seem like common sense, to have someone there to educate you, for instance, on how to set up a direct debit for your rent, how to ask questions for the first time, make sure you take pictures before you move in so you're not liable for damage. I'd ask questions on utilities being included, such as bins and Wi-Fi's. I know I've personally never been educated on skills or the etiquette it takes to be a renter, or even the basics of maintaining a household. Sorry, now the contacts are playing up, like I said. But along with conversations with numerous of my peers, especially those who, like me, are wards of the states or for various reasons do not have stable and reliable parental figures to teach them, Richard was giving me a lot of peace of mind in this process. Now, the apartment search did not take long, as the only suitable accommodation for an 18-year-old living alone in Claremorris was a flat in an apartment complex This cost €750 a month, not including bills or broadband. So this left me with a budget then of €550 a month to spend on food, storage unit heating, electricity, broadband, school essentials, my mocks, uniforms, and then just like your general day-to-day of being a young person in Ireland. So, like, despite the fact when you go into care you think at 1,200 it's a huge amount of money, you realise quickly it is absolutely not. And I found that the help and support I received when securing the accommodation vanished when I had secured it and had my lease in place. I was gifted a MABS leaflet and a budget cookbook and told to work away and deal with the finances or lack thereof myself. And the communication vanished from the government body that was there to put in place to support vulnerable people like me as we tried to navigate our way into adulthood. After approximately 3 months living alone, I couldn't help but find the irony of my situation. The same group of people who spent over 2 years building a case to obtain a court order to remove myself and my brothers from a situation that they did not find acceptable due to the conditions we were subject to, were putting me in a predicament I had not faced since the age of 7. Yet here I was at 18, going to bed either hungry or cold because you could just not simply afford to pay for both food and heating in the 1 week. For those of you who have or continue to live paycheck by paycheck or week to week, you understand that it's highly intense and a mentally debilitating way to live. But it's not just the reality for care leavers, it's the reality for a lot of young people across the country. We're being forced to live with the astronomical prices of rent, the insane fees for a third level education, never mind the day-to-day expenses. I have 10 good friends on placement around our country, and they all need to do placement for their degrees. One of them is being paid. We go out and work in the world to try to afford this economic climate, but we're getting paid minimum wage due to our age, yet doing, in most cases, completely the exact same work as our older colleagues. To highlight the lack of long-term housing in one of Ireland's major cities, since moving to Galway in 2020, I've lived in 7 different addresses, one of which I was assisted in finding by my aftercare worker, which was accommodation through the college in NUIG. And not only being there a year, he was contacting me to search for accommodation for other care leavers coming to Galway. Only 2 out of those 7 landlords took bank transfers and payments. Every other accommodation was cash in hand. In most cases, there was no leases or contracts to ensure your residency, but if you didn't comply, there was a list of students ready to take your place. Only 3 months ago, I was informed by my landlord that they would be selling my last accommodation, only to see the house advertised on Facebook for €100 more per month per room for than the last 5 people who are occupying it. Every young person I associate with has either dropped out of education as they can't afford to commute or rent, emigrated and pay cheaper rent in East London and parts of Australia than I pay for a box room in Galway, or living in a constant state of debt and just using the likes of St. Vincent de Paul and the Red Cross for financial aid. We need better and we deserve better. To effectively tackle youth homelessness, we must invest in preventative measures such as early education and programmes on basic life skills. Like in Freuga, we implemented a programme called Ready Steady Life, and it just, like, a lot of people, they don't have the luxury of being there and having a parent to teach them how to put on a wash, or ridiculous things like a budget. Like, you do it in Leave Insert, and then for the likes of aftercare leavers, you're given a leaflet and told to work away. We need to fundamentally create a society where every young person has a secure and stable place to call home. It's a simple 4-letter word that we all have the right to.
Thank you so much, Karina. As always, I feel so empowered, so motivated and ready to do something. Thank you so much for being with us tonight. And I know it hasn't been easy, but you're just an incredible individual, and that has to be said. So last, we have reflections from Clúid, from Eileen O'Connor, who is the Chief Commercial Officer With over 24 years of experience working in the construction industry, Eileen has worked at a senior level with key stakeholders, local authorities and developers in the delivery of social and affordable housing. She was instrumental in developing learner procurement for Clúid and was first to develop a forward-funded arrangement for the delivery of housing in partnership with developers over 10 years ago. This is a very successful delivery model for Clúid and now adopted widely by the AHB sector. We are very grateful to have you here, Eileen, to share your reflections. Thank you. There you go.
Thanks, everybody. So I'm just going to wrap up. I'm not going to take too long because I know it's late in the evening. I'm going to do some thank yous and also just let you know about what Clúid are doing, the steps we've taken to date, and the next steps for Clúid in delivery of youth housing. Okay. So, firstly, thanks to all the speakers. Presentations were amazing, and thanks for sharing your knowledge and your expertise. It's given us lots of food for thought and lots of learning from tonight. So we will take that away, and hopefully we'll get the opportunity to come back and talk to you all again at some point in the near future. I'd also like to particularly highlight Karina. You're an amazing advocate for youth housing, and I think it just reinforces the importance of having the voice of young people involved in everything we do and in the delivery of youth housing. So that's really important. We might be calling on you again. We're setting up a resident youth advisory group, so it'll be fantastic to have your input in that. At some point in the near future. So look, there are a lot of kind of reoccurring themes in the presentations tonight. Some of them, you'd know about, and others you wouldn't. I think early intervention is absolutely critical. That came out really clear in the presentations. The need for, I suppose, keeping people local to their community, to their supports, to their family, to their friends. And it's one of the things that I suppose it was a massive learning for me, because we had an event in April where we met actually some people in this room fed into that kind of discussion around youth housing. And I suppose I was sitting at a table with some people, and I think someone from Crosscare actually, and I thought, this is actually quite exciting. We're going to be able to deliver housing similar to our clan age friendly offerings. So our schemes where you might have 40 apartments with lots of communal facilities and lots of ancillary services and scheme manager on site. And I was thinking, I was already designing in my head the recreational amenity, funky, really cool spaces for youth. And I was put straight very quickly that would not work. So it's interesting to learn, but it just reinforces as well the need for research, getting out there, talking to international speakers and organisations who are doing this and doing it really well, talking to national organisations and learning, what works and what doesn't work. So we're at a very early stage in our youth housing journey. So we're still at that investigation stage, but the next steps for us really are, I suppose, setting up. We have an internal working group, and that is, I suppose, it's made up of lots of people from different parts of our company. So they all come from different backgrounds, and they're bringing very different knowledge. Some have worked in youth housing before, in previous roles, and they bring that knowledge. But we are hoping to, I suppose, look at what's the best model for Clúid to deliver. So right now, we're a housing provider. We know how to deliver, how to develop houses, and how to manage and maintain them really well. We do that. That's our core business, and we do it really well. But we don't have the expertise in delivering support services. So we do need to partner with people in this room and other organisations for the support services, and as well to learn what works, what doesn't work, what the risks are. And Tracy, you mentioned some of those, and obviously you're very similar to Clúid, Almond Housing, and interesting to hear about Audrey, your experience and just, I suppose, learning and making sure that Clúid can actually deliver a model that's sustainable for us, that's viable for us, and that will be successful. I suppose Adam mentioned that we just recently joined the coalition to end youth homelessness, and that's very exciting for us. And again, it gives us an opportunity to work with other organisations and learn from peers in the delivery of housing. So again, the importance of collaboration and partnership was very evident in all the presentations and in the panel discussion tonight. We are starting a resident advisory group. Clúid's family is growing day by day. We have 28,000 residents, in excess of that actually at the moment, and it's growing. We hope to deliver another 1,300 homes by the end of the year, so that's significant growth in residents as well. So our main focus to date has been around family housing and also age-friendly housing. So we deliver that and we do it really well. 9% of our residents are actually between the age of 18 and 24, and it's not a cohort that we engage with, and we're starting to do that now, and we're looking at ways of how we can do that better. And it's interesting, I think, Marina, you mentioned that we need to be a little bit more, we need to adapt our communication to those residents because they're very digital and obviously much more savvy, techie than us. But look, we're starting that, and we hope to get a lot of engagement with our residents, our youth residents, in the near future, and get lots of feedback and hear what they actually want from youth housing. And it's again keeping them in place and keeping them in their community, local to their families, their friends, their supports, amenities, and local community. Okay, so I suppose I won't keep you too long. I'm going to finish up. Thanks to everybody for, again, an amazing, lots of presentations, amazing presentations, and your contribution to the discussion tonight. I think Simon would have absolutely loved it. He'd love to have been sitting here right in the middle of it, having the discussion, asking the questions, and he would have really enjoyed the engagement from everybody. I say thanks to the Lighthouse Cinema and their staff for allowing us to use this really cool place, and also for Brambles for looking after the catering for us. Again, we hope you really enjoyed tonight and the discussion, and it's the start of a journey for Clúid, so we're very excited about it. So thank you.
Yeah, we just have one more contribution before the official closing, but I'd just like to welcome Anna Husef, who is Simon's wife, as well, just to say a few words.
In about 90 seconds, because I know it's been a long and very thought-provoking session. So I just want to reiterate our thanks as a family and personal friends outside of housing, as well as the personal friends and colleagues of Simon in housing, to Clúid for putting so much into this event. I mean, I've always said Simon wouldn't. He would have, if I'd suggested the idea of even one event like this, he'd have said, don't be ridiculous. You know, they have other things to be doing than anything to do with me. So thank you so much, and thank you. It's brilliant to hear about Simon as a lecturer. He loved lecturing. He loved pacing up and down. I wished I'd gone and watched him doing it. And he always tried to think up jokes about housing, and he said he never could, which was a disappointment to him. Now, just one last thing I want to say. And thank you to everybody who's come here, including my family and friends who aren't in housing, who I suppose got a bit of a glimpse this evening of how complex and how demanding and difficult and rewarding it is to do this kind of work. The last thing I just want to say quickly is we still have some copies left of this magazine that was produced and edited by David Silk, who's here, as a tribute to Simon. And it has very interesting kind of range of reflections and sort of illustrations of what's going on in housing in Ireland. And finally, I also have quite a pile left of the bookmark that we made as a remembrance or memorial of Simon. So if anybody wants one or wants an extra one, they'll be up here, and you're very welcome. So, go a míle mágah.
So we're actually just about on time. So just to bring everything to a close, I just wanted to thank everyone, every single person in the seat. I actually counted how many people we had. We had 76 people, and considering we had a storm and windy weather and rain, it's really, really heartening to see so many people come to listen about all the different perspectives that we heard from today. I just have a couple of thank yous as well. So the Lighthouse Cinema, Brambles, all our wonderful international speakers, panellists. It was absolutely incredible listening to you all. The people behind the scenes, facilities who aren't actually here in Clúid with all the booking arrangements, they helped out a lot as well. The comms and policy team supporting us, Laura taking minutes, Fiona running around with the microphone and everything. All your work has been so appreciated, so I just want to say thank you so much. This event was the product of months of planning, getting in touch with people, thinking of concepts, sessions, looking at event venues, catering. All of that takes a lot of time, and I'm just really happy that today went quite well, I hope. And I really hope that you learned something meaningful. If it's one thought that you have that you can sit with later on this evening, if it's one connection that you made, Ian, I heard you made a couple, or contact someone who you spoke to and learn a bit more. This is the event part of the connection building partnerships, learning from one another. And I know Simon did a lot in that in his work, and I hope that this event will carry that on. And finally, in order to change society, we need a couple of people with a few ideas that bring more people together, that act as a vehicle to bring about meaningful change. And I really hope that maybe in a couple of years' time we might be able to reflect back on this event, whether it's that we were successful in some kind of youth housing delivery, or if it was an opportunity for learning or excitement or motivation or whatever it was. I really think that hopefully you leave a bit more empowered and motivated after tonight. So it's been an honour being the MC and co-lead organiser from this alongside Andrew, and thank you all so much, and I wish you all a very lovely evening. Thank you.